You just finished your fucking website and you're ready to go viral. You go on Google, nowhere to be seen. What the fuck, dude? We're gonna go to the top of Google right now using Next.js. So let's fucking do it. All right, so right here is the website we're working with, and this is in development mode, but I've also already deployed this. And so the first step is make sure you have a legit domain. If it's -Verzel-app, that's not good. You need a legitimate domain. If you want to know how to do that, I got a video in the description. So once you do that, you want to make sure you're using semantic HTML. So let's say you got something like this. Instead of this just being here, or you want to wrap this in a div or something, instead of doing that, you want to wrap this in a nav tag. And then if you want to put some other stuff in here, you can wrap all of this in a header tag and then put like some image right here or something. And then down here, instead of just having a div for all the content, you make this main. And then within this main, you can use articles and sections. And then if you have a button, instead of having a div, and you can do on click if you want, you don't want to do that. You want to make this a button and then do on click. So make sure you're using semantic HTML. Once you do all that, you're also going to want to make as many things server side as possible. This makes it faster and it makes it easier for Google to understand these things and understand the website. And the easier it is for Google to understand your website, the higher chance you'll have of ranking high. So we have this home page right here. This is a server component right now. But let's say we have this button and we want this on click. This right here, on click, has to take place on the client. So you might think, oh, now we have to come up here and we have to make this whole thing use client. You don't have to do that. What you should do is get rid of this, get rid of this. We'll come in and we'll create components and we'll say slash, we'll just call this home button.tsx rfce. And then we'll come to the top right here and we'll say use client. And then right here, button, and we can say on click, and then we can make it do whatever we want. And so now we come back over here, and instead of writing the button component in here, now we can just import this. And so now this entire page is a server component, but this button right here is the only thing that's a client component. And the end user is not going to notice the difference. It's going to look exactly the same, but to Google, it makes a significant difference. So you want to get as fine-grained as you can. Anytime there's something that has to be on the client, try to make as little of the code as possible on the client. You don't have to be some freak trying to do all this crazy stuff, but just know that you want as few things to be on the client as possible. So if we head over here to the Next.js documentation, it talks about metadata. So if we come over here to the layout, you can already see that when you create a Next.js project, it has this metadata right here. This is only the tip of the iceberg. So if you read this documentation, it talks all about it. And so what this is actually doing under the hood, let's come over here to this website and open up the developer tools. So right here on every single website, there's the body, which right here, the body. And so we can see it right here on this website, but there's also the head. And this is all this information. And this is information that Google uses to understand the website. So if we want to do good with SEO, we need to have this metadata. And so what you could do is just come in here and write it like this. This is how it used to be done if you're just writing plain HTML. But in Next.js, they offer us this, which is very helpful. So you've probably used just this before. So for instance, if I go like that, then you can see, now it says the title right there. And so if we go to Google and we just say like stores near me, and then we can see find a store nearby. So if we click on this, that's exactly what this is right here. And so there's a lot of different things that you can put in here. For every single one of my projects, I've just done this one time, and now I just paste this in every single time. And so you can see right here, there's title, description. We need to import these things. So we're going to come in here to lib, and we're going to create a new file called constants.ts. And then we're going to say export const title equals my website. And then we'll say description. And so how I generate this description is I just come over here to ChatGPT and I have this prompt that I already wrote, and I'll put this in the description. Just fill in the blank right there. Just click enter, and then this will give you something. And then I just copy this and then just paste it in right here. Just wrap this in quotes. And obviously you're going to want to dial this in a little bit more, but this is a very good starting point. So now we can come back over here and we can import this title and we can import the description. And so the description is going to be this part right here. So this is the title and this is the description. When someone searches you on Google, these right here, the title and the description, that's what they're going to see. And this is also what Google sees. And so what you can do right here for the title, you can just go like that. And so now this title is going to be my website across the whole website. But what I've done right here is I've said default is title, which is my website. And then I have this template right here, which when I show you in other routes, you'll understand this. So basically in another route, if I just set the title to about, then on that route, it's going to say about with this thing and then the title. And so also from what I've read, keywords don't really do much, but I would still just add like 5 good keywords. And you want to make these pretty specific, because if you just say something very generic, that's a very competitive keyword. You want to be very specific. So I'm in Las Vegas, so I would say website maker Las Vegas. If I just say, oh no, but I want the whole world to see my stuff, you're going to have a much smaller chance of getting to the top competing with those people compared to competing with very specific keywords. I also have this metadata base, and this is just the URL. So you're going to want to go to .env.local, make this file, and then you're going to want to set this to this. But then when you deploy it, you have to make sure you set this environment variable to whatever your website is. And this is just here so that when we set this URL, this thing knows that it should start with this. And so this open graph, this website right here will show us exactly what this is. So if I go to my website, superlativesites.com, it's going to show us that if someone shares it on Facebook, it's going to look like this. If they form it on X or LinkedIn, this is what it's going to look like. So we're going to add this image in a second. If I go to, this is a demobroski.mom, which is the current website we're working on, we can see that it's not going to show anything. So you need to make sure that you have this image. And so how we do that, there's multiple ways to do this. If you read the docs, which are in the description, you can just simply add the image in the app directory and then it's going to show it. But what I do is I always include it in the metadata, because then you can dynamically change it. So if there's a different route that there could be a different article and each article has a different image, we can dynamically fetch this. So I just do it in the metadata as opposed to putting it in the app directory. And so all this is about that open graph image, and then same with this Twitter image. And then we also want to have a fav icon. And so what I do to get this open graph image and this fav icon, I use Canva, just type in logo, and then it gives us a 500 by 500. And then we can just add an element, make this full size, add some text, make this a little bit larger. And then you share this, you download it. You want transparent background, download this. And then we just type in PNG to ICO, and then select our file, convert it, download this. And now we can drag this in to our app directory and rename this to fav icon. And sometimes it doesn't show up in development, but when we deploy this, we will see this. And also for the open graph, I come up here and I type in Facebook, and then I believe it's a Facebook post landscape. You want these dimensions, 1200 by 630. It says that in the Next.js documentation. And so we can just do whatever. And then we download this. And then what I do with this is I drag this into the public folder. And then I'm also going to take so we have the ICO, but we also have the PNG from the logo. I'm going to drag that in as well. And I'm just going to call this logo because we might need this in other places. And then I'm going to rename this to just simply open graph image. And so now if I push this and we wait for this to deploy, when I go and type in the URL on this website, it should be updated. So now we can see if we type this in again, that if someone shares this on Facebook or X, it's going to show this image right here. And I'm going to show you in a second how to do this dynamically so it can be an image dependent on the exact page. And so now that we have this base metadata laid out here in the layout file, we can come to every single route. So like the about page, contact page, all of your pages. And then we can just say a title. And then I always put in this text. We have to import this metadata real quick. And then so I just put this into Chat GPT, and then I kind of dial this in for each route. And so right here, if we put this to about, now we can see that if I come over here to the about page, this says about slash my website. That's the template I was talking about earlier. And so I go through every single route and I add this, and I just call it something simple like about, contact, and then I add the description. So now let's talk about dynamic metadata. So let's say we have this page right here, and there's artist 1, 2, there's all these different artists, and we want, instead of this up here to just say my website or artist page, we want it to every single time say their name and then say artists or something. So instead of using metadata right here, we're going to use something called generate metadata. So I'm going to paste this in, and then I'm going to import a couple of things. And so now, before it was just static, now we have this function called generate metadata that returns the metadata like this. And so if you want this open graph image to be something different, or this Twitter thing to be something different, you can change that in here. For this, I'm just going to show you how to make a dynamic title and description. So if you look in this artist page, we can see right here that we have a fetch request, and this is how you get the artist data. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all this code, and we're going to come up in this generate metadata, and we're going to paste it. And then we also need the search params. And so just like that, now we have the artist. So the title is going to be artist.name. And then for this, we're just going to get rid of the description. And so now we can see that the title is dynamic. So depending on the route, it's going to change. And so how this fetching works, if you're using the fetch API, this is going to automatically cache. So you think, oh, I'm running the fetch request right here and generate metadata, and I'm using it right here, so I'm doing it twice every single time. Because fetch caches it, this is not going to do it twice. It's only going to run it once. If you're using an ORM like Drizzle, which is what I always use, then you can create a function called like fetch data, and then fetch all this data, and then you can use something called, let's see, import cache from React, and then you take all of this and you wrap this inside of cache, and it's going to return the data. So you would run that function right here in the generate metadata, and then you take the exact same function and run it right here in the artist component, and it's only going to run it once because it's been cached. So another thing we can do, if we type in pnpm build or npm run build, and we wait for this output, we can see all of our routes, and we can see if they're static or dynamic. So our about page is static. It's always the same. Our artist page has to be dynamic because it doesn't know what the ID is until someone actually uses the page. And so if it's static, it can render the HTML one time, and then every single time someone calls that page, it just sends it over immediately without having to do anything. If it's dynamic, then every single time someone goes to the same route, it has to render the HTML and send it. So if I go to this route right here, and then some other guy that goes to this route, even though it's the exact same content, the server has to render it 2 times. If 20 people visit it, it has to render it 20 times. And this is unnecessary. What we can do is use something called generate static params. So if we come over here to the docs, we can just simply copy this code right here, and then come over to our code, and we can put this right here below generate metadata. And so what you would actually do is you would make a call to your database, but right here, I just have this file right here that is mimicking my database. So in this generate static params, we say we can return artists, which we import, and then instead of post, this is going to be artist, and it's going to be ID, and instead of slug, it's going to be ID. And then we can get rid of this and get rid of this. So now if we do pnpm build or npm run build, we can now see that before this thing was just straight up dynamic. Now we can see that it knows there's only 4 possible routes. And so you got to be careful with using this though. If you have something like a blog post that is going to remain constant then that's okay. But if you have something that's constantly changing, you shouldn't do this, because let's say these artists were being updated every single day. Then if you do this, it could possibly use some cache data that is no longer accurate. And so how this works is artist/1, the first time someone goes to that endpoint, the server's going to render the HTML and send it. Now I'm the second guy going to this page. It's already been rendered on the server. Boom, it sends it. So if you have hundreds of blog posts, every time the first person goes to that page, the server is going to render it that one time. And then every time after that, it's just going to send the rendered HTML. So now there's two more very important things we can do. So if we come in here to the app directory and we create a new file called sitemap.ts, and then I'm going to paste all this code in here. And if you go to the docs, which I have in the description, you can read about this to see exactly where I got this code from. So I'm going to remove a couple of these things. And so we've got this function, which I'll explain in a second. And so right here, this is what we need, this function called sitemap. And so what this is going to do, if we go to a website and we go to /sitemap.xml, it's going to have basically a list of all of the web pages of that website, so that when Google is trying to understand websites, if the website has a sitemap file, then Google can read this and immediately know what's going on and know everything about your website. So you need to have a sitemap file, and you can just create a sitemap.xml file, but Next.js has set this up for us so we can do this very easily. So what you're going to want to do, how I have set this up, is for each of your page routes. So right here, we've got an about page. So we're going to say about, and then we also have the home page, which is just blank. And so how I've written this, if you're using files that require parentheses or dynamic things, you're going to want to type those in. And so what you could do is you could just say, for all the page routes, create something that has the URL and the date last modified, and you could just set this equal to new date. But I want to make this as accurate as possible. So I've created this function right here called get last modified date that looks at the file at all of these routes, and then it looks at the time it was last modified. And so now static routes is just a list where it has the URL and the last modified. And so this is, you're only going to want to do this for your static routes. For our artist route, there could be ID 1, 2, 3, 4. It could go up to 400. We don't want to have to manually do that every single time. So we can dynamically do this. Let me just get rid of this real quick. So you'd want to query your database here. It's just, the data is just locally here. And so instead of this being product, I'm going to rename all of this to artist. And then this is not the route. It's source/app/artists/ ID. And then this is just artists, which we import from our artists file. And so in your database, you're typically going to have something that is updated at, so that you know, oh, this artist was updated at this time. And so you're going to want to look at that, and you're going to want to compare it to the last time that this file was updated. So that, let's say I update this file, but all of the data on the artists is unchanged. You would still want Google to know that that change has been made. So whether you update it, like you go in there and you change the artist's albums, or you actually change the page itself, you're going to want to know when either of those things are updated, and you're going to want the most recent date out of those two. But for this, we don't have the updated at, so this is just simply going to be equal to this, and we can get rid of this. And so now if I push this and we wait for this to deploy, I can show you that now my sitemap is going to be live. So now if we go to our website and we go to /sitemap.xml, we can see that it has our sitemap, and this is not accurate. I forgot I removed the artist routes from it, so it was just the static route. So I got to push this again. So now if we come over here to the sitemap, we can see that it has the home page, about page, and all of these. So if you go into your database and you add 40 more of these things, when you deploy it, it's automatically going to add them to your sitemap. So now we're going to come in here and we're going to create a robots.ts file. And all this does is it tells Google which routes to not look at. So let's say you have an admin part of your website and you don't want this to be findable on Google. So you just put all the routes right here and all the documentation is linked below. So for this website, we don't have any, but I'll still leave this file here. So once we do all that, we want to come over here to Google Search Console. This part is very important. We're going to type in our domain, and then we're going to take this right here, and we have to go to Namecheap or wherever you got your domain from. We're going to click on our domain. We're going to go to Advanced DNS, and then we're going to create a TXT record, and we put an @ symbol, and then we paste in that value. And then we hit this check mark. We come back here. We click verify. It's probably not going to work. We got to wait like a minute. So I'm going to try this again. I'm going to click verify and boom, ownership verified. So we're going to go to property. And then the first thing we're going to do, we're going to go to sitemaps and we're going to get the URL of our website. And we're going to paste this in and we're going to say /sitemap.xml. And then we're going to submit this. And so now Google knows about our sitemap. And then the next thing we're going to want to do is come over here and I go to sitemap.xml and I look at all of these routes and then I copy them. I come back and I type them up here and we can see URL is not on Google. Google doesn't know about this route yet. So I'm going to request indexing and you can only do this a couple times a day. And so now the indexing has been requested. So now we just have to wait. Could take a day, could take less than a day, but Google's going to do this. So now if we type in site and then we say, this is a demo broski.mom, we can see that our website is not on Google yet. But because we did this, Google's going to know about it much sooner compared to if we just posted our website online and just waited. So there it is. You learned something? Subscribe. You want to learn some more? Watch this video right here. See you next time.